Welcome to this week's episode of the FullScope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'm your host, Matt Van Pelt, and with me today are FullScope IT's CTO, Dan Walk. How are you today, Dan?
Great. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing fantastic. And also with me today is Brian Amadeo from Business Development. How are you, Brian?
Excellent, Matt. Pleasure to see both you guys.
All right. Absolutely. Okay, so I guess we'll get started with today's buzzword, which is DDoS attack.
Breaking down the buzzword.
Distributed denial of service, or DDoS attacks, are a type of cyber attack where multiple compromised computers, often controlled by a single perpetrator or group, are used to flood a target system, such as a server, website, or network with excessive traffic. This surge in traffic overwhelms the target's capabilities, causing it to slow down significantly or become entirely inaccessible to legitimate users. The primary aim is to disrupt the system's normal function rather than to breach its security for data theft. Wow. Dan, has there been anything recent regarding DDoS attacks?
I feel like that description was written by an AI. We
It probably was.
tend to talk about AI frequently enough. There has been some interesting news lately. A few weeks ago, October 10th, 2023, if you're watching this some other year, Google and Cloudflare detected the largest ever DDoS attack that has been detected in the history of the internet. And, the numbers are really big. So they got it peaked at 398 million requests per second, which they say is more requests than Wikipedia gets in an entire month. All in 1 second.
Wow.
So, it does go to show that the attackers are really putting a lot of effort into DDoS as an attack vector, and their capabilities are growing.
What was the attack on? Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure exactly who was attacked.
Because that would have shut that service down, right?
The problem was that it relied on a flaw in the HTTP2 rapid reset, which allowed a lot of additional requests to be generated from a smaller number of number of requests.
That's brilliant.
It's very interesting that, to look at how these things evolve, that it's not just things that are generating traffic and sending them out. They're actually using flaws in protocols to amplify the attacks.
Wow. That's really interesting.
The traditional DDoS attacks were from botnets or camera systems that had been broken into, where they would just use these IoT devices and individual PCs on home connections to just send out as much traffic as they can. But it's really evolved to amplifying the attacks through these flaws. And they've also, I was reading another article recently that a lot of the attacks have switched from these IoT devices, which have very limited CPU and bandwidth, and they've moved on to either compromising VMs in large data centers that have terabits of bandwidth in the data center, or they've been just buying time on virtual machines in the data centers with stolen credit cards, and that a small number of these VMs can generate more traffic than tens of thousands of cameras that are sitting in homes and businesses.
I think I can remember this was a few years ago, but talking about the appliances and kind of their bandwidth, but someone had gone after service was like, say, Netflix or Amazon Video or somebody like that. But they used those surveillance cameras as a way, the bots grabbed those and then they turned around and they grabbed, a million cameras across the world and they pointed them towards whoever service that was. And it shut down the service. So, we all couldn't watch our Netflix for like 3 hours or something while they figured this out. But it was a resource thing, like what you're saying.
The customers that we deal with, there's two general problems with this. One is if they themselves are attacked, it can disrupt their business. But services that they rely on can be attacked and can cause problems with their business. So, Netflix, it's terrible when you can't get into Netflix, but if you're running a business and you can't get into your banking website, that can cause some real problems.
Yeah. So how do you detect and protect from something like this? Oh, that sounded cheesy. No, okay, go ahead.
I don't know, it rhymed. Detect and protect.
Detect and protect.
Those are two really different questions. Detecting can be very challenging because we run monitoring systems on customer firewalls, but if a customer themselves is under attack, that firewall may simply look like it went offline, and we wouldn't be able to see whether it was under attack or whether somebody crashed into a telephone pole or the power went out. They would just be offline. And we really need to rely on the ISP to detect these attacks and mitigate them so that it doesn't clog up the pipe to the customer themselves. But as far as protecting, there's a few things we can do on the firewall that deal with some of these protocol issues. The firewalls can detect when there's too many TCP connection requests per second or too many UDP packets that are on the same port. These are both indications that something's going wrong and we should block this traffic. And very often that can go a long way to stopping the attacks from progressing. They can also go a long way to stopping devices on the customer network from being abused to attack someone else. But the bigger way to protect yourself is to not let the attackers know you even exist. So very often, if a company has a website, we will work with them to move it behind something like Cloudflare. And so Cloudflare gets attacked, and they have a massive network that can handle these attacks. Microsoft can do this as well. And even if you have to run the web server on, in your office, on a server in your office, we can still put it behind these services and hide your office from the rest of the internet while protecting it by these services.
And you maintain business continuity at that point, like it doesn't disrupt?
There can be certain outages. So if the attackers are primarily near one Cloudflare data center, their attacks may be focused on that one Cloudflare data center, and people in that area may have degradation of service. But Cloudflare is so distributed that it's virtually impossible to attack their services in all their data centers at once. And also to do it over a prolonged period of time. And Cloudflare, they might be my favorite service that can do this, but they're certainly not alone in this space. We also work with a lot of customers to migrate their on-premises Exchange servers into the cloud, so that that the email that's coming in isn't advertising what your address is on the internet. It's going to Microsoft or Google or some other service provider's data center. So even if your email is being attacked, it's not going to attack your entire office connection to the internet.
That's brilliant. When I learned that type of a thing happened, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. But
typically the attacks are being done against data centers these days, simply because of what I just said. A lot of these inbound services are moving to the data centers, and your DSL or your fiber or cable connection to the internet is really just that, your on-ramp that is mostly hidden. We do our best to hide this from the internet at large so that you can't be attacked if nobody knows where to find you.
so the reason for the going after the data center is just the mass effect. Is that why? Because so many people are tied into it?
Your cable modem may only be like a gigabit, or your fiber may be a gigabit, which is a tremendous amount of bandwidth, although there's some Google fiber cities that are 10 gigabit to the home, and they're even or to the home and office, and they're testing 20 gigabit to the home and office, which is
Wow.
really great. But even so, these data centers can have aggregate of terabits of bandwidth into the data center, thousands of gigabits, and so it becomes very, very hard to overrun those systems, and they also tend to have a lot of automatic response systems that will mitigate these DDoS attacks by shutting them off at the other end of their connection. And so by moving your attackable services into these data centers, they are harder to attack and they're easier to respond to the attacks.
So for people that don't really have a lot of choice in their ISP, you kind of get what you get. But you're saying there is some vetting you can do if you've got choices,
Yeah.
and it's a question you can ask if you feel like maybe your business is one that is looked for. If you believe you're more of a threat.
Yeah, if you have to run your services on-prem and you have to expose them to the internet, you should really look for an ISP that has DDoS, anti-DDoS products available to add on to your account.
That's good information.
All right. Well, that brings us to this week's tech tip.
Well, if it isn't a tech tip.
Safeguard your network against DDoS attacks. If you're interested in learning more about DDoS attacks and how to avoid your business from falling victim to one, check out our blog post called What is a DDoS Attack and How to Prevent Them. There will be a link in this week's episode description, and you can also find it under the blog section on our website, FullScopeIT.com.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
All right, this week's story of the week, brought to us from Vice.com. New York City mayor casually announces he's deepfaking himself. Experts are horrified. There's a quote from the Surveillance Technology Oversight Project condemning the robocalls and calling them deceptive. Quote, "This is deeply unethical, especially on the taxpayer's dime." Executive Director Albert Fox Kahn said in a statement, "Using AI to convince New Yorkers that he speaks languages that he doesn't is deeply Orwellian. Yes, we need announcements in all of New Yorkers' native languages, but the deepfakes are just a creepy vanity project." Ooh, scathing. What do we think about that?
This is interesting.
I agree that it might be creepy. Um, but I don't really agree with much else that he said. The man is the mayor of New York City, and I don't think there's I don't think there's any issue with him wanting to use his own voice to get these
Yeah.
public service announcements out to the. But
I
I
think the
don't.
problem
I'm
was
not sure what's unethical
Right.
about it. These
I think that
are.
what they're saying is the problem was he was passing it off that he could, like, people thought he could speak these languages, and they're saying
Yeah.
the problem with that.
Yeah.
But I don't see how it's
I-
Orwellian. That I don't agree with.
I don't see how it's Orwellian because he's not trying to take over New York
Right.
City.
Trying to help.
He's trying to help the citizens of the city be informed. But it might be creepy, depending on how they sound. And
They have to
there
use his
probably should be
voice, I
rules
guess.
in place,
Yeah.
and the announcements probably should specify that the audio is being generated by artificial intelligence.
Is it different than
Um,
subtitles?
And what,
I mean, is it any
subtitles?
different?
Well, they were phone calls.
Yeah, they're phone calls, so
Hmm.
they're like automated.
Yeah,
phone,
and
they're,
I didn't really get the impression that he was trying to convince people that he could speak all these languages. He just wanted to get these messages out, and
they're all, and it's hiring events and free concert series. It's not like they're
Right.
That's
right.
It's not.
I don't think it would be
Trade
very hard
secrets.
for him to apologize and say, I didn't mean to give you the impression that I speak all these languages. And it sounds like when he runs into people that say, hey, I didn't know you spoke Mandarin, I don't think he's lying to them and
Right.
saying, oh yeah, I can speak Mandarin. I think it's just a very simple gap to close to have a little disclaimer at the beginning of these calls.
yeah.
But I
and
think it would
looks
be
like they're
comforting,
using. It seems like they're using this article as a jumping point for using it in political campaigns and all that kind of stuff, like misleading people using AI. And where does it end? Where does it start and where does it end?
If they made that jump, I think we would have a lot more to talk about. But based on what they've done so far, I think it can be very comforting to have people who don't speak English as their first language to get these information calls from their mayor in a language that they understand. I think that can give them a lot of faith in the city government, and I don't see that as Orwellian.
Yeah, I don't either. I think this is a good example of using technology for good. I mean, we all know like the cool things get always used for evil at some point, but this is I think this is a good example of a great way to use
Yeah.
technology. I mean, isn't there other like live translate services as well? Right? Is this really
Yeah.
much different than that? Where you're just communicating on.
Well, and banning it basically makes it a tool just for the bad guys.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah, I don't see the problem on this one. Unless there is motive here that we're unaware of or that wasn't revealed in the article.
We should have prepared better and had a recording of one of us speaking about DDoS attacks
In a deep fake?
a foreign language.
Ooh.
Um,
Ooh, can we just do that on another episode? Do the whole
That'd be
episode on deep faking and
yeah. Maybe,
for all.
maybe we can
We'll
edit
do a
that in at
special
this point.
edition foreign
I don't know.
language podcast.
So remember the robot dogs? So would they be doing the announcements?
I was going to tie that in too. Another thing that said something was creepy.
Yeah, and New York,
you know?
and when they go do these public announcements in the situation of an emergency, this is a great example of being able to deliver information in multiple ways to multiple people. Maybe it would even be the mayor's voice coming from one of those dogs. That might appear creepy, but if it's getting the message across in the event of an emergency, I'm still going with that's a good thing.
Creepy does not equal evil.
Not always. Well, and I think the deep faking thing everybody finds creepy. So I think as soon as you say deep fake, that just seems to be a description that many carry along with the word. So
Yeah, deep fake just has bad mojo, on it,
yeah,
bad juju, or whatever you want to call it. It's like a bad word now.
because
deep
it's fake,
So
it's lying.
don't
right?
use
That's
that to
what
describe it.
That's how our brain processes fake.
Deep fake, I think, is meant to do harm.
I think it's like any tool. It's what you do with the tool,
Exactly.
not what the tool is. And clearly, there are some tools that lend themselves more towards bad things. So I'm all for there being some regulation on AI and deep fakes, and there should be disclaimers, but that shouldn't stop us from using it as a tool that's used for good.
Yeah, kind of like at the beginning of the audio call, say, just like, this is being recorded, like certain states have to announce those things. This could be no different, right? If it's just in the very beginning, there's an audio disclaimer, and then, hey, this is
This has been translated to whatever language for your...
in the likeness of this individual. Yeah.
Here we go. We're solving the
Done.
world problems here, guys.
Check the box.
Good job. All right. Probably a good spot to end it for this week. So, thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the FullScope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, so until then, stay behind your firewall.